All right. So welcome everybody. Most of you know me, but for those of you who don't, or for those of you who might be watching the recording and who haven't met me, my name is Courtney. I am the director of our memory support community, Tapestries, here at United Methodist Communities of Pittman. I have a lot of background in dementia, in traumatic brain injury, and brain health, in mental illness. So basically all things related to the brain. So this is a really big passion of mine. And if you'll please all pardon my disheveled appearance, we had a massive water balloon fight with the residents today, so I'm still a little soaked. So I don't normally look like I've been drowned, but so please don't let that be distracting at all. All right, so we're going to get started. I'm going to focus a lot on like the way memory works in the brain and how we support the different elements of memory. So feel free to jump in at any point if you have any questions, if you have any comments, if, you know, whatever the case may be. Okay. All right. So we're going to begin with some basics of memory and brain function. And so you'll see I have a little asterisk here on our slide, and that's because we don't actually know all of the details of memory. The brain is the single most complicated organ in our bodies, which I don't think is a surprise to anyone, and we still don't know a lot about how it works. So this information is the current best practice, the current best working theories and beliefs that we have about brain chemistry and how memory works, but it is being updated all the time. So if you hear something conflicting, you know, or if you decide to do more research, which I absolutely encourage you to do, just know that you might find differences in what you're looking at. But this is kind of the overall what most professionals agree on at this point with the information that we have. So we have three main types of memory. So you've probably heard of these. So we have our long-term memory, which is how we store things from long ago, exactly what it sounds like. So this is how we remember our life experiences, the information that we learned, you know, as kids, as young adults, patterns in our lives, our daily routines, all of that. It is the one that lasts the longest, particularly for those with dementia. You'll find that they're much better with their long-term memory than with their short-term memory. And it can be contextual or sensory based. So I don't know if you've ever had this experience, but maybe you, you know, you smell something, say you smell cookies baking, and it just brings back a really vivid memory of baking cookies with your grandma when you were little. So that's what I mean by it could be sensory based. Smell is the sense most closely associated with memory. So smell tends to be a really great tool if we want to help our loved ones with reminiscence. But it can be true of any senses. So maybe you go and see a beautiful garden and it reminds you of a time you went to Longwood Gardens at Christmas or something like that. So, so it can be like that. It can also be contextual, like you might remember certain things in certain spaces or in certain conditions. So I don't know if anybody's ever heard of state dependent memory. That means that if you were in a particular condition or in a particular place. So what we usually think about this is somebody who's under the influence of alcohol, for example, might not remember something that they know when they're sober, but they may remember it the next time they drink. That can also be specific to places. So you might go specific places and have memories come back to you that would otherwise not be there. You might say go to a child or a grandchild's baseball game and it brings back memories of your own as kids or of other things. And so, so there's a lot of stuff that we can use to help trigger memories for long-term memory. Short term is also exactly what it sounds like. So this is the ability to store more recent information. It varies, the timeline varies a little for everybody, but we could consider short term anything from what happened today to what happened this week, typically on average. Um, the things we keep in short term memory are often converted to long term memory, usually with rest. So if you remember being kids in school and having a big test the next day, if you stayed up all night cramming to study, by the time the test got there, you probably forgot a lot of it because you needed sleep for your brain to encode that information into your memory. That's why teachers tell kids to get a good night's sleep before a big test. Our brain never stops working. It just changes what it does depending on the time of day. So a lot of what we go through during the day gets sorted and stored, and our brain figures out what's important and what isn't, and puts the important stuff in our long-term memory and gets rid of whatever we don't need to take forward with us into the next day. Short-term memory is impacted by time. So there's something called decay that happens over time. So something that you remembered yesterday might be gone today just because time has passed if you haven't committed it to a deeper form of memory. And it's also impacted by capacity limits. And so this is different person to person, but each of us has a certain amount of short-term information that we can store at a given time. So working memory is a smaller branch of short term. So these are very closely connected, but this is for immediate information. So this is how we hold and manipulate information for immediate use. So this might be you're solving a math problem in your head. You're going to the grocery store for a quick trip and you just need to remember what 3 things you're going for. It might be I am getting up out of the living room and going to the kitchen, and I need to remember what I went into the kitchen for, which I know is sometimes a challenge for some of us. But it's typically a small amount of information and it's available for a small amount of time, and it's task specific. Like we're holding that information to do something with it in the relatively immediate future. Just like short-term memory, it's also impacted by those time and capacity limits. There are ways to make it better, but it tends to be kind of a finite amount of gains that you can make in that regard. You're not going to have like a super powered working memory. And it can be impacted by both internal and external factors. So what I mean by that, so an external factor might be, I was thinking of those 3 items I need from the grocery store, and then I ran into an old friend from college that I haven't seen in a few years and started talking to them, and now that information is gone and I have no idea why I'm at the grocery store. It might be an internal factor, like something within yourself. So if anybody has attention deficit disorder, that can be a challenge. It could be I'm hungry, I'm tired, I'm cold, I'm distracted for whatever reason. Maybe I got to the grocery store and I need a quarter to put in the cart, otherwise it won't give me the cart or whatever. And then in the frustration of looking through my bag, I'm just too frustrated and I don't remember what I need, something like that. So dementia impacts several aspects of memory. And so when I say that, I don't just mean it impacts our working memory, our short-term memory, and our long-term memory, although that is true. It also impacts how we access memory, how we store memory. So the part of our brain that's responsible for sorting that short-term information and deciding what's important is often one of the first things to go with dementia. Similarly, the part of our brain that retrieves the files that we kind of keep in our brain for memory is also hard. So if you want to think of it as, your brain is like a little county office with a lot of filing cabinets and a lot of files of everything you've done in your life. And you have one file clerk that takes care of everything. At the end of every day, they sort everything that was important and put it in its respective spot. And then the next time you need that information, they know exactly where to go and find it and pull it up so that you can recall it. With dementia, that person has too much on their desk and can't get it all filed. So some pieces might get stored, but the bulk of it probably isn't going to be. And often we would like to think that it's the important details that get stored, but realistically, that file clerk is just grabbing what's on top of the pile and going from there, or grabbing the loose paper that fell off to the side and going from there. So they might remember a trivial detail like, oh, I had peaches with lunch yesterday, but they may not remember a big detail like I had a doctor's appointment or any of the details from that appointment. There's not really a lot of rhyme or reason to it. Also, the retrieval, so that same file clerk now is overwhelmed by all the paper on their desk, they're going to have a hard time remembering where the files are. So it's not that the memory is gone, it's that they can't find it. It's still in there somewhere, but it's much harder for them to figure out what part of the brain to go to access that. So that's a lot of what is a struggle for people with dementia in remembering. Some of the other challenges is that it negatively impacts learning. So learning is not only what we think of when we think of, like going to school or training at a new job, trying a new hobby, things like that. It's also our ability to take a situation and apply what we gather from that situation to a new situation. So meeting new people can be very difficult because I don't remember that I know that person. I may not remember information about that person. Learning the routine of a new place. For some of you who've moved your loved ones in, we talk about we would rather people move into a memory support community earlier rather than later in their dementia process, because we want them to figure out where they go and what the routine is and make some friends before that learning piece falls apart so that they don't struggle with ever getting it. And that's why, because keeping all of that new information becomes very difficult. And then also complex attention. So this is two primary things. One is our ability to sort out the background noise and focus on the thing at hand. So if anything is a distraction at all, you may notice that your loved ones with dementia have a harder time with reminiscing, a harder time with their memory recall. And it might not be things you're thinking of. So even if we think about this right here, so it's just you and me, it's all of us together. And in theory, I'm doing the majority of the talking and your job is to listen and occasionally contribute. But but maybe you're outside and it's a beautiful day and you hear birds chirping, or you're just enjoying the weather. Maybe you have dinner on the stove and you're thinking about how am I going to manage the timing. Maybe you have a pet or a grandkid or something running around and you're also focusing on that. For our loved ones with dementia, it becomes very hard to filter out that noise to focus. And so that makes it harder for them to be able to remember. And then essential memory functions like chunking might be impacted. So chunking is what happens when we connect information together to make it more, to make it easier to remember. So if we use that grocery store analogy, maybe you remember, I've got to run 3 errands today. I'm going to the grocery store, I'm going to the post office, and I need to go to the pharmacy. And at the grocery store, you need to pick up 4 items. So you might think 3 places, 4 items, 3 places, 4 items. So you've now chunked those 2 things together to make more space in your memory so that you can hold on to more information. And so what happens then is when it comes time for recall, you go to the grocery store, okay, I'm here, I needed 4 things. What were those 4 things? And then you can be more specific and focused on that. And then you can kind of switch back to that bigger chunk. Okay, I'm done at the grocery store. What else did I have to do? 3 places, 4 things. So does that make sense? So that's something that becomes much more difficult, if not impossible, for our loved ones with dementia. And as a general rule across the board, regardless of what type of dementia we have or where our loved ones are in the process of it, we want to consider that the first things to go in the brain are the last things to come out. So that's why you may find that that childhood memories are much easier for your loved one to recall than what they did earlier today, even. I know, so I said we had a water balloon fight an hour and a half ago. About 5 minutes before I started this meeting, I asked one of the residents who participated if she had a good time, and she said, "With what?" But she remembered having spoken to me yesterday about, I have a little stuffed lamb in the mailbox outside my door, and she remembered having spoken to me about that. So it's just kind of a strange thing. And it's very fluid, but you may find that they remember things from long ago much more quickly, and much more easily. And this is true not only of memories, but also of life skills. So if you ever feel frustrated with your loved one, if you ever feel like, oh, they're acting really childish, or they're being really immature, it may not be your imagination. It may be that they forgot their grown-up manners, and so they're falling back on their teenage manners, which we all know can be a little lacking at times. So it's kind of true across the board, but we want to remember the first things to go in are the last things to come out typically. And so if we want to have our best possible chance of helping our loved ones remember, we want to try to help them remember those long ago things, because they're going to be more successful in that regard. Any questions about any of this information before I go on? No? All right. So then I kind of broke it down into each type of memory and how we help our loved ones with that particular type of memory. And then we can go into more detail from there about, like, as far as the timeline and where our loved one is in their dementia journey. So for working memory, especially for those in the moderate or late stages of dementia, it's pretty much non-existent. Okay. In the very early stages, we may see that they do still have some working memory. It might be a little bit disorganized. So they may, for example, remember that they want to send a letter, but they don't remember how to address it or how to put the stamp on it, or they may remember they need to put a stamp on it, but it's in the completely wrong place, that sort of thing. So it might still be there, but it might be a little bit of a struggle. But for most of our loved ones with dementia, we're acting as their working memory. So when we do that, we want to stick with an immediate action and give one prompt at a time. So if your goal is to help your loved one remember, we need to get ready to go out to lunch, you're not going to use that, because that's way too broad and way too much for them to process potentially. So you're going to stick to it one thing at a time. We're going out to lunch. Let's comb your hair. And then after they've done that, let's brush your teeth. Would you like to put on some lipstick? Would you, and so on. And we're going to break it down one task at a time. And so when we think about where our loved one is in their journey, what constitutes one task at a time could be very different across that spectrum. So in the early to moderate stages, one task at a time might be go brush your teeth. And that's a simple direction that they can follow. Further along in the journey, go brush your teeth might be a 25-step endeavor. It might be, let's go into the bathroom. Let's get your toothbrush. Let's put some toothpaste on it. Let's turn on the sink. Let's wet the toothbrush. And so you're going to scale how much support you give based on where your loved one is. We want to use consistent wording if we need to remind them. So I know some of our residents, so some of your loved ones, can hold that information in their mind for a few minutes. So they can't hold a ton of information, but they can hold that one instruction for a few minutes. Others can only hold it for a few seconds. And so I may have to repeat myself every 30 seconds. I want to try to use the exact same wording I used the first time, because it creates less work for the brain in trying to interpret something new. And I want to give that prompt as as I can, so that they don't feel like I'm reminding them. So what I mean by that is, you're not going to say, let's go brush your teeth. We need to get your teeth brushed. Let's go in the bathroom and brush your teeth. That's 3 different prompts. So we're going to pick one of those and stick with it every time to give them the best chance for success. We also want to make sure that our tone doesn't become harsh or frustrated as we go, because they don't remember we've already told them this. So we want to make sure that it sounds like it's the first time every time. And if we do need to like kind of change our tactics a little bit, or if we do need to give them additional prompts, we want to try to make them seem natural or conversational. So rather than saying, oh, I already told you we did this, or don't you remember we need to brush your teeth, you're going to say, oh, let me get your toothbrush for you, kind of a thing. And in that, you've offered assistance, but you've also reminded them of the task at hand. And you've done it in a way that seems natural, rather than in a way that seems like you're parenting them, for lack of a better term. Because often they already feel like they've been treated like children a lot. It's unfortunately the side effect of becoming older in our society, is that we become very dependent on people younger than us for a lot of things. And that can be very humiliating for a lot of seniors in general. And for people with dementia, it tends to be worse, because they don't necessarily understand why they need that increased help. So we want to try to make it seem like we're just being natural and helpful, and not like we're watching their every move, if that makes sense. We can definitely use visual cues, and visual cues again might depend on where our loved one is in the process. So it might be that I'm going to set it up. So maybe I set out the toothbrush and the toothpaste, or even put the toothpaste on the toothbrush and leave it in the bathroom, so that they have that visual cue when they walk in. Oh, right, this is what I'm here to do. It may be that you join in. Maybe you bring your toothbrush and toothpaste and you brush your teeth together, because now they can see what you're doing and follow your lead, that they're going to be doing the same thing. Whenever possible, this is that complex attention thing I talked about, the inability to filter out background noise. We want to limit distractions. This is true across the board for all the types of memory. If you want to give your loved one the best chance at success for remembering something, you want to have it be as serene a space as possible, with as few distractions as possible. And this is also true across the board. We want to make sure that we're being patient and that we're being present. Especially, so just because I've used this kind of analogy the whole time, I'll stick with it. If you're taking your loved one out for lunch and you're getting them ready, you might be thinking, we have a 12 o'clock reservation. And so having it take this extended time and having to take longer to do things to get them ready might be a little bit frustrating for us. We need to remember that they're doing the best that they can, and that putting that additional pressure on them, like if we seem impatient, they're going to pick up on that immediately, and they're going to get flustered and maybe even disheartened and not want to do it anymore. So better to be a little late to your reservation, or to get here a little earlier to leave time for that, so that you can be patient with them. And across the board, we want to make sure that we're really being present and mindful in that moment. One of the ways that I always think about dementia is that they are masters of mindfulness. That's all they can be. The only moment they guaranteed have is the moment they are currently living in. And frankly, that's a thing that we should all do more of. You know, it's healthier for all of us to not worry so much about the past and not worry so much about the future. But that can be very difficult when you've got a lot going on in your life. And so we want to follow their lead a little bit and stay present in that moment and try to find whatever joy and whatever beauty is in that moment with them. So maybe they're struggling, but it's great that you get to spend that time with them and be that person for them that they were for you when you were a child, and give back to them in that way. And if you can frame it that way, it can help stay in that moment and stay positive, even when it can be a little bit challenging. Any questions, comments about any of this? No? All right. So we'll move on to short term. You're going to see there's a lot of similarities between what we'll do for short term and what we'll do for long term. But we'll try to talk about it in more detail. So again, just like with that working memory, visual cues can be incredibly helpful. And visual cues for helping support short-term memory is going to look like props or photos. So when I say photos, so I know a lot of you have our K4 app, or we put out pictures on our website all the time. Maybe you see things on Facebook. When you come in to see your loved one, you might pull up those photos and have a photo of your loved one doing something and say, oh, it was so nice to see you doing this, and show them that picture and then let them fill in the blanks. That visual cue can be really powerful. A prop might be anything. It might be, you know, you want them to remember having gone out to dinner, so you bring them dessert from that restaurant to help trigger that memory. It might be, you know, remember this teddy bear from when you were, you know, a kid, and you bring the teddy bear, or something to that effect. So it can be a lot of different things. You might use the activity calendar, something like that. Oh, did you go to the water balloon fight today? Did you, you know, did you play bingo? Did you do this? Did you do that? And use that and let them look at it and see if it jogs anything. It isn't necessarily a guarantee, but the more senses we stimulate, the better our odds are. We want to use open-ended questions whenever possible. So basically what we're doing there is allowing them to fill in the gaps. So, did you enjoy your lunch today? Is a better question than what did you have for lunch today? Because with what you had for lunch today, there's one right answer and they may not remember it. And so we've set them up to be unsuccessful. And you may see it with, I know with a lot of your loved ones, what I see is when we ask them a direct question with one right answer and they can't answer it, they get very upset very quickly about it. And often they're upset not with us, but with themselves. Why am I so stupid? I should remember this. I don't understand what's wrong. And I don't ever want anybody to feel that way, you know, and I'm sure that you don't want that for your loved one either. So we want to ask a question that's got a broader range of answers and that allows them to fill in the gaps. So, did you enjoy your lunch today? What did you enjoy about it? And then maybe they say, oh, we had fried fish and it was really good. But maybe they say, I sat with my friend Mary and we had a really good time. and so you open the door for them to give you a broader number of right answers, and then you can get more information from those answers. Oh yeah, what did you and Mary talk about? What made it such a good time? So it just gives a lot more room for them to be successful, a lot more room for you to engage on that level. We want to have realistic expectations. So again, there may or may not be a time when they remember explicitly what you're asking. They might surprise you and remember a ton of details. They may not remember anything. And in that case, we don't want to get hung up on it. We don't want to make them feel inadequate about it. We want to keep going. We also want to be able to go with the flow and go on the journey with them. So if they remember something that is a little bit different than how we remember it, we want to accept that. So maybe you're looking at the activity calendar and you're saying, oh, there was bingo and a water balloon fight today. And they say, no, we played balloon volleyball. Okay, that's the reality you're given. Okay, how did balloon volleyball go? So you're just going to follow their lead, and that's where you're going to go with that. Even if the information isn't true. One of the things that I see a lot, especially for those of you that visit frequently, we've got some family members that come every day. And when they see you, they go, I haven't seen you in months. Now, that's not true. There might be the urge to correct them, but you don't want to do that. Because again, we don't want to create that feeling of like, how could I forget that? And now I'm disappointed in myself. So we want to make sure that we're kind of going with the flow on that. We want to keep those realistic expectations in mind. One of the things that I hear a lot from family is, oh, she wouldn't forget something like that. That's really important. It's not that they're forgetting things that they don't feel are important. Okay. Realistically, people with dementia eventually forget their most beloved people in the world's names. It's not that they don't think you're important. It's that their brain isn't cooperating. So we just want to make sure that we have realistic expectations. It's pretty random what information they can and can't recall. So we want to make sure we do that. And we want to make sure that we're following their emotional cues. So if we ask them a question and they look distressed, it may be because they don't remember the answer and they're frustrated with themselves. And so if that's the case, we want to feed them a little bit of information to help them either come up with the right answer or to fill in that gap so that we can change the brain's course before they're beating themselves up for it. So, what did you do today? And they're looking panicked, or they're like, yeah, I don't remember what I did today. Oh my gosh, how stupid am I? Why can't I remember? And if you start to see that, that's when you can kind of go with a leading statement or a leading question and say, oh, I saw a picture of you with Mary at lunch. And, and help put their train of thought on a different track, so to speak. I do have a question in chat. What do you think about offering choices and do you remember questions with advancing dementia? I've noticed both of those causing more anxiety and withdrawal. Okay, so I think your observations are spot on. I don't know if anybody else has had this experience, but do you remember? Or even worse, don't you remember? Which it's such a subtle difference, but for whatever reason, it makes a world of impact for our loved ones with dementia. We really want to avoid those types of questions because they do have one right answer, and often they're disappointed with themselves when they don't. So instead of a do you remember type question, especially as our loved ones get more progressive in theirs, we're going to come back to those open-ended questions. what was it like when you met dad? How did you know that you loved him? Something like that, something that gives them a broader range of answers. Or even more general than that, tell me about how you met, or tell me about dad. What was it like? Tell me about school, something like that, where they can pick and choose what details they provide. You're going to see less anxiety and probably less withdrawal than that, because that gives them more opportunity for success. Offering choices, on the other hand, is phenomenal. Oftentimes our loved ones with dementia, our senior loved ones in general, but our loved ones with dementia specifically, tend to feel out of control of their lives. They don't remember what they need to do today. They don't remember what they're supposed to be doing next. Often they need a lot of assistance in a lot of areas, so they tend to not feel in control. So giving choices can be really powerful for them. The issue is that we want to be careful of offering too many choices. So whenever possible, we want to keep it to 2. And also, whenever possible, we want to keep it to 2 things that we can represent visually, that they can see. So for example, what would you like to wear today? Your red shirt or your blue shirt? And you're going to hold both up where they can see them. So I know what we do in the dining room at meal times is that we offer both plates, and we'll carry both plates out. Would you like this one or this one? And they can see what they're choosing and point to it, and it makes life a lot easier. So that can be helpful when you're offering choices. If we're giving more choices than 2, maybe 3, depending on where our loved one is, we may find that that's when we're seeing them be more anxious. Of course, as we get into the later stages of dementia, so the later end of the moderate stage and into the more advanced and severe stages, they may not be able to make choices at all, or they may not be able to verbalize those choices. And so at that point, we want to do our best to honor what they historically would have chosen. So that's really anybody's guess. Hopefully you know them well enough to be able to make educated guesses. So if you know that their favorite color is blue and you held up the red shirt and the blue shirt, you're going to put the blue shirt on them because blue is their favorite color. Or maybe the red shirt is softer or warmer and you know that they're cold, and so you're going to put that one on. So you're going to kind of make decisions for them if they're unable to choose based on what your best information is about their preferences. Does that make sense? Okay. So I hope that answered your question. Any questions about any of the supporting short-term memory?
Courtney, Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Steve, okay, I had to switch devices midstream.
Oh, okay.
It was, you had mentioned before, given choices. Now, one was, okay, did you enjoy your move to the music, or did you go move to the music? And so you were given a choice there. Do they get frustrated trying to figure out if they went, or is it better to say, did you just enjoy your session with move to the music?
I would probably go with, did you enjoy your move to the music? Because that way you're letting them know they went, and you're allowing them to fill in what details they have. So that at that point they can tell you, like, yes, I enjoyed it, or no, I didn't. And they might supply additional information. So they might say, yeah, I had a great time. They played my favorite song. Or I had a great time. I went with my friend Jean. They might say, no, I was really tired today and I didn't want to do it. Or they might say, no, they sat me next to Susan and she's not careful about where her hands are and she hit me, whatever the case may be. So we want to try to stick to the one that has more right answers. So typically yes or no questions, like, did you go? Do you remember going? That have either a yes or no, or that have one right answer, are usually going to be worse.
Do they get more frustrated if they can't come up with a response to your question?
I do absolutely see that. They get very frustrated. Often they get very frustrated with themselves. So they're very angry at themselves for not being able to remember. Um, I see a lot of people that put themselves down. What is wrong with me? Why can't I remember this? I'm so stupid. Like, I see that a lot. Occasionally I will see people who will turn that around. Maybe they're embarrassed or maybe they're very proud, and they'll turn that frustration on, on us, on their loved ones, on staff, on whoever is asking the questions. And so sometimes they'll go, I don't want to talk to you. Will you just leave me alone? Like that kind of thing. And it's really because they're embarrassed that they don't want to answer those questions, or that they're not able to answer those questions. And so they're trying to derail the conversation rather than fail to engage in the conversation, if that makes sense.
Would it be beneficial to try to encourage them to come up with an answer or change the subject entirely?
So I tend to believe that we should follow their lead. So if they seem frustrated, we probably don't want to push the issue. So if we have information about it, we can provide that. So maybe, if we lead with the example you used of, did you enjoy moving with music today? And they have like that blank look on their face, or they seem frustrated, then maybe you say, oh, I talked to Jessica or Ashley who run that. And they said it looked like you had a really good time. You can supply that information. If you can't supply that information and they seem frustrated, it may be better to change topics to something else that they can be more successful at. So that might be something else that you ask. That might be something else that they start. So you may want to switch gears and say, oh, that's okay. What would you like to talk about? Why don't you tell me about your day? And see what they have to say, because they may not remember going to move in with the music, but they might remember some other aspect of their day. And so you give them an opportunity to talk about what they do remember.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Right. So then we will move on to supporting long-term memory. And so as I mentioned, a lot of this is going to be similar, because the tools that are helpful are always good tools, kind of like there's never a bad time to have a hammer and a screwdriver around. You never know when you're going to need one. So same is kind of true for this. So when we're talking about long-term memory, the older the topic, the more successful our loved one is going to be. School stories are hugely helpful. Almost all of our residents can tell us something about being in school. I know just last week we had a conversation about one-room schoolhouses and having 6 different grades all in the same classroom. And a lot of them remembered a lot of details about that, especially mischief. Mischief is always a really good memory tool. Many of them could remember times they were in trouble with the teacher. Or times they played pranks on the teacher, which was a very fun story. So the older the memory, the better it's going to be. So things like about school, their favorite music when they were kids, what kind of things they liked to do, even like depending on where they are in their journey, early in their like work, married life, family life, that sort of thing. The older the information is, the more likely they will be to remember it. Again, we're going to use visual cues, and that's going to include those props, those photos. Just like with short-term memory, again, the older, the better. What we see often for people with dementia is that they don't recognize photos of themselves that were taken a week ago, but they recognize photos of themselves when they were 20. I've had a great many residents say like, oh, how old are you? And when I tell them, oh, I'm 37, they'll go, me too. Because in their mind, they still are. So they think of themselves in that way. And that's also true. Like if you've ever heard them say, where's my mother? Or where are my kids? And they may ask you where their kids are. And you're like, Dad, I'm your son, I'm your daughter. And they're going, no, you're not. My son is 7 years old, whatever the case may be. So they may be at a different point time-wise in their head than they are in the reality that we're looking at. And so if we can use older photos, if we can use older props, like again, childhood toys, things like that, those are probably going to be more successful than newer things. I also have on here sensory boxes. So this is a tool that we use, but it is absolutely a tool that you can use and put together pretty easily. And it can be about anything. So you can take any old shoebox and you're going to put stuff in it that you think might trigger a memory. This can be super specific things. So if you want to talk with your loved one about their wedding day, maybe you're going to put a photo of the wedding day and their cake topper if they still have it, and their wedding ring, and if they had like a veil or a garter or a fancy champagne glass or whatever the case, you're going to put very specific things to their wedding in it. And then when you get here, you're going to say, oh, look at this box I found. Let's go through it together, and let them take the items out and let those items trigger memories and let them tell you about those things. It can also be a super general box. So obviously we don't have access to those things for every single one of your loved ones. So we have themed boxes. And so I've got a couple here just so you can kind of see them. So this is a seashore box, and it's literally just full of sand and seashells. So, and we can take this box out and it triggers a lot of those memories. So they're going through and they're picking up the seashells, and they'll start talking about when they collected seashells as a kid. Or they'll like run the sand through their fingers and remember times when they built sand castles. Often they remember bringing their children to the beach. So you might hear fun stories about yourself growing up from something like that. And it's just as simple as like, once you kind of get the gears moving on a specific topic, that file clerk starts scrambling to find things that relate to that topic. And you may find things that don't seem to make sense too. So you might hand them the seashore box and they pick up a seashell and it reminds them of a paperweight that was in their father's office when they were kids, and they start telling you that thing. Like it's not necessarily logical, but sensory input helps memory. So things we can see, touch, smell, those are all going to help make our memories better. That's true while we're building memories. That's also true while we're recalling memories. And so it helps our loved ones, the more senses we can engage. Another sensory box, just so you can kind of see how different they can be. So this one is a kitchen themed box. So for anybody who liked to cook, a lot of our ladies were homemakers and housewives, things like that. They did a lot of baking. And it's just got kitchen gadgets in it. We've got a strainer and a pizza cutter and a potato masher. I cannot tell you how many memories a potato masher will bring up, because we don't really use these anymore. So this is a thing that's very specific to them and in their lives, and they get this in their hand and they suddenly have all kinds of holiday memories of making mashed potatoes for Thanksgiving, or their parents teaching them how to cook, or them teaching you how to cook, or things like that. So you can really just grab odds and ends from around the house that seem connected and throw them in a box, and ta-da, you've got a sensory box. And it can be something that you use to start a conversation, and you can make that very casual. Like I said, like, oh, I found this, let's go through it together, and let them initiate that. Again, we want to use open-ended questions and we want to elicit details. And so the way that we're going to elicit details is with yes and then add something onto that. So, so maybe they're going through the seashell box and they're saying like, oh, I used to go to Ocean City every summer when I was a kid. Yeah, and that sounds like a lot of fun. Tell me more. Oh, well, me and my brother used to dig really big holes and then wait for the sea to come and fill them in. So we had a swimming pool. Oh, did you ever dig it too deep and get stuck? Whatever the case may be, it's going to be yes and add a thought. And at that point, they can be yes or no questions. They can be a little bit more direct because we're already tapping into something that they remember and that they initiated. So they may have more detail on something like that. We want to try to keep, whenever they get a topic in mind that seems to really be prevalent, we want to lean into that and try to get them to tell us as much about that topic as they can in that moment, because it's right there, it's right at the edge of their brain. And so we want to use that to our advantage. We want to make sure, so this is kind of on that same topic. So when we're eliciting information, we want to be very positive about it. Yes, and tell me more. It's important to know that details might change. So if this is a story you've heard before, it may not match the same way they told it previously. They might remember certain details. They might change certain details. So maybe they say, oh, we used to go to Ocean City all the time. And then this time they tell the story and they say, oh, we used to go to Atlantic City all the time. Your instinct might be to say, no, we didn't. We went to Ocean City. Don't do that. Because again, just like we see that frustration, I think our hearts are in the right place when we do that, because we think we're helping them with their memory by correcting them. But what we're actually doing is highlighting the fact that they're wrong. And that's when we see that frustration creep back in. So we may see that they get a little bit more defeated, maybe even angry or upset if we correct them. So if they tell you a detail that isn't right, or if they tell you a detail that can't be right. I know I've had residents say, my mom was just here. Now I know that's not true, but I'm not going to say, no, that's not possible. She wasn't, because that's going to upset them. So what I'm going to say instead is, oh, did you have a nice visit? Tell me more about mom. And that gives them an opportunity to fill in that information and tell me about their mother, so that, so we want to make sure we're going with yes and giving opportunities for them to continue rather than correcting them and shutting them down. We want to use context to our advantage. So anytime we have, again, those sensory boxes or sensory information in general, if it's a beautiful sunny day, take them outside. They're more likely to remember beautiful sunny day memories. If we take them out to dinner, they're more likely to remember restaurant memories or dinner memories, things like that. So we can use that context to our advantage. And we can appeal to related topics. So if they tell you a story about going to the beach when they were kids, you might want to say, and what else did you do when you were a kid? Because they're already kind of digging around in that file in their brain. We may have a better chance of getting an answer on a related question. We want to, again, make sure that we've got those realistic expectations and that we go with the flow. So again, I have this: accept the reality you're given. This is not my quote. So if you, at the bottom of the slide, there's this thing that says, check out this video. This is, I think it's like an 11-minute TED Talk about how we use improvisational skills to help people with dementia. And they do a really lovely job of highlighting both the goods and the bads, so that you can kind of see in real time what to do, what not to do. So if you have time, and you want to check that out, I definitely recommend it. But it's something that they say is accept the reality you're given rather than forcing your reality. So if they give us a weird detail or a detail that we know isn't true, we're going to run with that because they still have more to tell us on that topic. If we correct them, we end the topic, we end the story, and we may lose whatever they had to share in that moment. Again, we want to manage that urge to correct, and we want to contribute details when possible. So especially when we're talking about stories that they've told before, if they look like they've gotten stuck, you can fill that in. Oh, I remember one time when we went to Ocean City and we flew a kite on the beach and the kite flew away because the wind was so strong. You know, whatever the case may be, you're going to fill in those details and see if that triggers something for them. Most of the time, you're going to get one of two things. Either they're going to say, oh yeah, I remember that now. They may or may not. But they're likely going to agree with you, and they may expand upon it, which is even better. You know, so feel free if you do have details about something that they've already told you in the past, or even something that you personally remember because, you know, it's a story from your life, feel free to add in and help support their memory, because every detail makes a fuller picture and they may be able to find more details in their own brain the more we help out. And then again, we don't want to press the issue when hitting a barrier. So this kind of attests to your question. If they seem to be getting frustrated, we don't want to keep hammering that point that's frustrating them. We don't want to keep questioning them about the same topic that's frustrating them. We want to switch gears and give them an opportunity to be successful. And we may want to switch gears and give them an opportunity to rest. That might sound crazy, but if you've ever experienced mental fatigue, you know, I think that's something that a lot of us can relate to. It's maybe you didn't do a whole lot today, but your brain really worked today and you're tired at the end of the day. Our loved ones have a much lower capacity for mental fatigue because their brain just isn't working the way it once did. It doesn't have the millions of connections that it once had because of loss of brain tissue. So it takes a lot more work for them to do even the simplest of brain tasks. So if we do find that we're hitting that wall, that they're getting frustrated with us, it's okay to allow for some silence. It's okay to switch gears, maybe turn on some music, maybe turn on the television and say, you know what, like let's take a break for a few minutes. Or, you know, go get a snack, something like that, where it's a natural transition away from the thing that's frustrating them, and you give their brain a minute to rest. And maybe you're able to resume that topic after they've had a chance to kind of come back to themselves and catch their breath a little bit. Questions about any of that? No? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, go for it.
Yes. The question I have, like, well, my wife and I could be with my mom for a couple hours, 2-3 hours, and then she could be finishing up lunch, and then we'll decide to go, and we say goodbye, and everything's nice upon our departure. Then we're told later, not all the time, that she gets anxious and upset that we're leaving. And even though I'll say I'll see you tomorrow or the following day, which I'll usually say I'll see you tomorrow because that's more closer to the time that we're leaving as opposed to down the road. And then, but now my wife and I were thinking, do we kind of just slide away without making a formal departure or goodbye? And so she really, I don't think my mom would know that we had left because we could be there 3 hours. We go out of the room for 5 minutes, then come back in. And she said, like, we weren't there. You know, happy to see us and starting our greetings all over again. So I don't think that she would remember, but I feel bad doing it and not saying goodbye. But what is your opinion? What do you think about the best way to handle that?
So I would encourage you to still say goodbye. You know, she's still enjoying the visits. She's happy to see you when you're there. and saying goodbye gives a natural closure to it. So as I had said before, our loved ones with dementia are masters of mindfulness. They're only existing mentally in that moment. So if in that moment you sneak away without saying goodbye, it can create feelings of abandonment, and they might feel anxious and they may not know why they feel anxious. So giving that goodbye is still comforting in that moment, so that it puts a normal life experience end cap on that visit. Now, that said, this is kind of related. I do see a lot of our residents with dementia that do have more anxiety during the day that their loved ones visit. So if they know you're coming, what I often see is leading up to you getting here, they're very like, they're going to be here soon. Are they here yet? Are they here yet? They said they were coming. Are they still coming? Like, so they may have more anxiety leading up to a visit. And then while you're here, they're suddenly happy and they're calm and things are great and they're really excited that you're there. And then after you leave, whether it's immediately after or even sometimes a few hours later, it's a really strange thing. They may not even remember that you were there, but their behavior still changes, because they're kind of, it's almost like an emotional hangover. So sort of, I guess, is the best way that I can say it. So, while you're there and they're happy, their brain is being flooded with all these positive neurotransmitters, brain chemicals that make us feel good. So they love you, so they've got tons of oxytocin. They're having a good time, so they got lots of serotonin. They're comfortable, so they've got lots of dopamine, and all those things feel good. And it takes a certain amount of time for those things to work their way back out of the bloodstream. So once those things kind of work their way back out, that's when we see the anxiety creep back in. So even if they don't remember you were there, they can still have sort of a withdrawal from you having been there. I know a lot of families have asked me, does that mean we should visit less? And the answer is absolutely not. Okay. Again, they're masters of that mindfulness. Every moment you're there counts for a lot for them. Even if even if you've got one of those loved ones that can be, cranky and crotchety and kind of difficult while you're there, because realistically, some of our loved ones with dementia, as happy as they are to see us, can still be a little touchy. Even so, they're happiest during those times when you're with them. And that's what matters. So everything we do is about how do we give them the most moments of happiness, the most moments of comfort, the best possible quality of life. And your role in that is being present for them. So by all means, don't let the fact that they might feel anxious later stop you from doing what you're going to do. Come and see them, spend time with them. They appreciate it, even if they don't remember it later. You will be grateful for having had those times and having had those memories, eventually down the line when sadly the opportunity isn't there anymore. As far as helping with that anxiety, and this is something, if you want to call later in the day and talk with her on the phone, if that's an option, that might be something that's helpful. This is also something we can talk to the staff about. I know sometimes what we'll do is we'll take pictures while you're here, so that later when they don't remember that you've been here, we can show them like, oh, you had such a nice visit with your son today. And we can show them that picture that we took earlier, maybe hang it up on their wall, that sort of thing, so that they have something to remember it by. And again, this is going to fall primarily on the staff because you're already gone at that point, but they can be doing things to help alleviate that anxiety. So, maybe they show that picture, or maybe they say, well, your son was here to visit earlier. Do you want to talk about it? Do you want to tell me a little bit about your son? Tell me about your son and your daughter-in-law, and have them kind of put that energy to use in a way that helps them think a little more positively. And being able to do that gives not quite the same not the same jolt of those positive chemicals that you being there does, but it does give a little bit of a hair of the dog, so to speak, to help limit some of that anxiety. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you, Courtney.
You're welcome. Okay, so some hiccups and hurdles. So I've touched on a little bit of this already. We definitely want to expect some discrepancies. So details of the story might change. The location of the story may change. So like I said, maybe they really went to Ocean City, but they say Atlantic City, stuff like that. We want to just roll with those punches. We want to know that their reminiscence might not match reality, and it might merge with reality, and those can be two separate things. So when I say it might not match, maybe you're saying, well, you got married in 1935, and they're saying, no, I didn't. I got married 2 years ago, so it might be a total disjoint. It might be a kind of mushing together of real and imagined details. And that's what I see more often, is that usually in their memories, there's a nugget of truth at the center, and then it kind of snowballs from there. And so the more details they recall, the more likely we are to get things that aren't necessarily accurate. What's happening here? This isn't them like lying or, making up something. They don't have an overactive imagination. It's called confabulation. And basically that's a big fancy word that means that the brain takes what it knows and then fills in the gaps with whatever it believes to be the most logical explanation. It is important to know that the most logical explanation to them may not be a thing that makes logical sense to you at all. And so one of my favorite examples of this from my own experience is we have a lady that one day she saw something floral. She had a floral print on her blouse, and it was a tropical print. And so it was just, it was just a flowered shirt that she had in her closet, and we put it on. And her brain thought, I must have put this on because I'm going on vacation. And so when she came to us, she said, what time does the ship leave? Excuse me, what ship? Oh, the cruise I'm going on. Okay. And so that was my cue. I'm now the cruise director. So, oh yes, we're leaving in the morning. We're all going to meet here after breakfast and get on the ship together right after breakfast. Okay, then I'll need to finish packing. Oh, don't worry about packing. We've taken care of it for you. And I believe what I told her was, your sister gave us your packing list so that we could have it prepared. And her response was immediately, oh, that sounds like her. She's always been good, really organized about those things and always looking out for me. She's a really great big sister. And like, it was kind of a strange moment to come from a floral print shirt. But it was a good opportunity to reminisce with her about her sister. Oh, your sister sounds lovely. Can you tell me more about her? And, and ended up having a really good conversation with her from something that came completely out of left field. But it's really just that the brain takes a tiny detail that it knows to be true, and then whatever connections happen for the brain in that moment, that's what gets wrapped up in that story. So if you've ever had your loved one tell you like a truly outlandish thing, that's probably what's happening. It's just that their logical connection isn't necessarily the same as our logical connection. And it's also important to know that they might, in that process, have details that conflict each other, that doesn't seem possible, but that can coexist peacefully for them. And so what I mean by that, if I give another example, same lady actually, at one point said, I'm looking for my mother. She was just here an hour ago, but I can't find her. And so one of the strategies that we use is like kind of a therapeutic fibbing thing to try to get them. And we were like, oh, well, your mom had to run to the store, but she should be back in about an hour, because now we've calmed her fear about where is my mother by giving her a plausible answer rather than telling her, the heartbreaking information that her mom has died. Or so we thought, because what actually happened when we said, oh, your mom ran to the store, she'll be back in about an hour, what she actually said was, my mother is dead, are you crazy? And so she knew both things to be true. My mother was here and my mother is dead. And for us, that was very off-putting, because we were like, we're not sure which reality we lean to. But for her, those things were simultaneously true. And I do see that happen a lot in a variety of situations. So just know that you might see something like that. Frankly, do your best to run with it. It's always a curveball when that happens. So just do your best to kind of lean into it. So this next point, share your balloons. I mentioned in a previous video, in one of our previous meetings, there's this phenomenal children's book about dementia called The Remember Balloons by Jesse Oliveros. And it tells this beautiful story about how this grandfather used to tell his grandson all of these stories. And the analogy that the book sets up is that each of these memories is held inside of a balloon, and the purple balloon is from the time we did this, and the silver balloon is from the time we did that. And eventually the grandfather starts to lose his balloons, and the child has to share their balloons with the grandfather. You can find it on YouTube. People will read it and show you the pictures from the book. It will likely make you cry. I know I bawled like a baby. It's a beautiful story. If you have little ones in your life, it can be a really great way to help explain to them what's going on with your loved one. But that's what I mean by share your balloons, is that when all else fails, especially as they get further on in their dementia journey, tell them your stories rather than waiting for them to tell you theirs. Odds are good when they're able, they'll contribute details. They'll come up with connected things. They'll be able to engage in the conversation, for a while. But at the point when they can't anymore, you can tell them stories, and you can tell them stories about their own lives. So, and when you do that, rather than saying, do you remember, and then telling them the story, you're going to say, I remember, and tell them the story, so that it's not about whether they've succeeded or failed. It's about you sharing an experience with them. And it's a subtle difference, but it makes a world of difference for them. So we're going to share our balloons. We're going to share our stories and our memories and give them the opportunity to receive back some of the stories and some of the gifts that they've given us over the years. I already mentioned childhood school mischief questions tend to do well for memory. I do have a website on here. You can also Google this and get a ton of suggestions. But this link that I've got here is conversation starters for seniors. It's kind of impolitely called questions to ask old people, which is kind of rude. But it's a number of questions on different topics that are good open-ended questions that give you kind of a jumping off point. So if you really feel stuck and you want to check that out, or if you want to just Google like conversation starters for my loved one with dementia kind of a thing, conversation starters for for seniors in general, you're going to find probably some good things. And there's a lot of really great ones on this list. And of course, we want to be patient and be flexible. they're going to take time. Okay, it's a lot of mental energy, and they have a much smaller supply of mental energy to work with. So they've got less of it, and it takes more of it to do even smaller tasks. So we want to be able to give them the time they need to go slow, support them in, in whatever ways we can to make it easier on them, and be flexible. If it's really not happening that day, it's okay. Change gears. If reminiscing isn't working, then we focus on the moment now, the moment that we're in now, and how do we enjoy this moment. And maybe that's you turn on some of their favorite music and sing with them. Maybe that's you bring them a cup of coffee and just sit and chat over a cup of coffee. Further on in their dementia journey, maybe that's you bring some nail polish or a nice scented hand lotion and you just do their nails or give them a hand massage. Maybe you sit and just talk to them. As our loved ones lose the ability to engage in conversation, maybe we just go and have a one-sided conversation with them because they still benefit from hearing our voices and from knowing we're there and that we care. So we just want to be able to be patient with them and to be flexible as we go through the process and as they go through the process, so that we don't put any unnecessary pressure on them, because again, that goal is to create as many positive moments as possible. Any questions, comments about any of that? No? All right.
Thank you for covering this so very well.
Oh, you're welcome.
And for a future topic, something that I was dealing with my mom today was paranoia. Okay. And, what are, just as possibly a future topic, what are things that trigger it and what are the best ways to deal with it?
Okay. All right. Definitely. So I can say I don't want to give too much personal information, but it's been my experience that that for your mom, one of her big triggers is embarrassment. So if she feels embarrassed, that tends to be one of the things that sets it off. And then she starts to think, I'm not sure if it's that she's thinking I need to cover for this, and so she starts coming up with kind of the weird scenarios to explain it, or if she's thinking you're doing this on purpose to make me feel embarrassed, and that can be very defensive at times. It could be both, it could be neither. But what I see triggers it for her is embarrassment. That doesn't necessarily mean that's the same for everybody. But we can definitely talk about what we do about it. And so it's hard to say without a specific situation to go on. And again, I don't want to get too deep into personal business. Yeah. But I would say, typically in those moments, we want to make a judgment call based on the mood that our loved one is in and how the conversation seems to be going. And you might want to feed into the story and ask more questions about whatever the paranoia is, so that you can kind of figure out what the hidden need behind it might be. Okay. You may want to try to redirect entirely. And so you're
try that, but yeah.
and that's kind of the best short answer I can give you is that you're going to make a snap decision. If it's really causing distress, might be best to what do we need to do to get you on a different topic? Let's change gear.
And safety.
Yeah, definitely. But if we can, the more we find out about the fear, about whatever the paranoia may be, the better able we are to assess the need, and then meet the need, which hopefully fixes the paranoia. So that's your quick answer, and then we can talk about it in more detail in the future for sure.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else questions or future topic suggestions?
I can't think of anything, Courtney, but I'd like to thank you for your thoroughness and your care, obvious care, and the strategies that you offered. It's so helpful.
Yes.
So completely helpful. I'm really, really appreciative.
Oh, thank you so much. It really
I'm
is.
here.
Yeah, it really is a blessing and an honor to be able to know your loved ones and to work with them. I love my job. I love my job.
Oh,
I love
Evident.
all of them as though they are my very own family.
oh,
Very evident.
Yeah, so it's really it's truly an honor for me to be able to do that, and it's an honor for me to be able to help you have better relationships with them as they change.
yes.
So I'm very happy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Your happiness in your job is quite evident. Thank you, Courtney.
Yes.
Thank
Mhm.
you.
Thank you.
All right. All right. Well, if nobody has any other comments or suggestions, I guess I will bid you all a good night and let you get back to your evening. I will send out the video probably tomorrow morning, and I'll send out the slides that I used with that
Mhm.
as well. I think I saw some of you trying to take pictures of the screen,
did.
which is totally fine. But I'll also send you the slides so that you don't have to worry about it if your pictures are grainy or if they're hard to read or anything like that. So you can have it to refer back to.
Okay.
All right.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Have a good night, everyone.
Good night.